If you picture the Vatican at war, you might imagine the colorful Swiss Guard. But that's a later chapter. In the Middle Ages, the Pope wasn't only the spiritual head of Western Christianity, he was also a ruler who had to defend land, roads, ports, and cities across central Italy. That territory is often called the Papal States, and when conflict flared, the Church needed something very earthly. An army. And here's the twist, the Papal Army, in the medieval world wasn't always a single permanent force. It was often a mix, local militias, noble cavalry, hired professionals, and even ships, assembled and reshaped depending on the crisis. So tonight, let's walk through the Vatican's medieval war machine at its height, who served, what they carried, and what each branch actually did. And near the end, I'll tell you about one secret military figure, the kind of person history rarely records clearly, yet who may have decided battles without ever wearing a banner. 1. The chain of command, who gave the orders. In papal warfare, command could be split between religious power and battlefield reality. At the top was, of course, the Pope, but in practice he delegated war to high-ranking churchmen and professional captains. In the Middle Ages into the early modern period, one major role was the Captain General of the Church, often the de facto commander-in-chief of papal forces. Then there was the gonfalonier of the Church, literally the banner-bearer. Early on it could be a true war role, but over time it became more ceremonial and political, tied to symbols like papal banners and prestige. And beneath them, a changing layer of papal legates and governors, city commanders, and hard-eyed mercenary captains who cared less about theology and more about payroll. Because medieval Italy ran on contracts. 2. The backbone, city militias and local defenders. When trouble hit a town under papal rule, the first line of defense often wasn't a shining knight. It was local service, men called up to guard gates, patrol walls, and keep order inside the territory. In the 1200s, military service inside the papal state could function like a system built for internal security and policing, not just big field battles. These militia troops weren't uniformed like modern soldiers. They were craftsmen, dockworkers, farmers, people who owned spears, short swords, simple helmets, thick padded jackets, or a shield handed down through the family. Their job was brutally practical. Hold walls, block roads, raise alarms. Buy time until professionals arrived. If the papal army was a storm, the militia was the sandbag wall. 3. Heavy hitters, noble cavalry and men-at-arms. When the Pope needed real battlefield power, something that could break a line, he leaned on mounted warriors. Some were nobles with feudal obligations, others were hired men-at-arms, but the role was the same. Shock cavalry. Picture iron helmets, layered armor, and horses trained not to flinch at screaming men or flying arrows. Their function: charge at the right moment, smash into an enemy formation, and turn a battle into a rout. But cavalry was expensive, and Italy's politics were messy. That's why the papal states often turned to professionals who fought for whoever paid. Which brings us to the most iconic branch of the papal war machine. 4. The professionals, condottieri and mercenary companies. If medieval Italy had a business model for war, it was this. The condotta, the contract. A condottiero was essentially a commander who offered trained troops for hire under a formal agreement, especially from the mid-1300s onward into the 1500s. The papal states used these men heavily, sometimes because they were effective, sometimes because everyone else did, and sometimes because the Pope needed troops fast. One famous example of papal reconquest in the 1350s involved Cardinal Gil Alvarez Carrillo de Albornoz, a churchman who led campaigns with hired forces to reassert papal control in Italy. Mercenary companies brought disciplined infantry, trained cavalry, engineers, and soldiers who had fought in multiple wars. They were also dangerous, because loyalty could be bought. A papal treasurer might fund an army on Monday. And by Friday, that same army might be negotiating with a rival city. That's why the Pope's military wasn't just steel. It was paper, seals, and coin. 5. Infantry, spearmen, pikemen, and the wall of wood. While cavalry broke lines, infantry held the battlefield. Papal infantry could include spear formations for stopping horse charges, shield-bearing foot soldiers in tight ranks, and later on, more disciplined pike-style formations influenced by broader European trends. Their jobs were defend choke points, hold bridges, protect siege engines, and survive the kind of messy, close fighting that never makes it into heroic paintings. Infantry didn't get songs. Infantry got work. 6. Missile troops, crossbowmen and archers. If you wanted to make an armored noble suddenly fear the sky, you hired good missile troops. Italy was famous for crossbowmen, weapons with punch and precision. Crossbows were deadly against armor gaps and exposed horses, and they were excellent for wall defense, ambushes, and holding narrow streets where cavalry couldn't charge. In a city war, where battles happened at gates, alleys, and stairways, crossbowmen were a nightmare. A single bolt could change the command structure of an entire army. 7. Engineers and siege crews, the war behind the war. Medieval papal warfare wasn't only field battles. It was sieges. And sieges were slow violence. Digging, building, hauling, starving, and smashing stone with wood and iron. Siege crews built and operated ladders and siege towers, rams, barricades, and in later medieval periods, early artillery. Engineers mattered because Italy was full of fortified towns. If you couldn't take walls, you couldn't control territory. And control, more than glory, was the real papal objective. 8. The sea arm, the papal navy and coastal power. Most people don't expect this, but the papacy also maintained a naval arm at different periods. The papal navy is often described as existing in a loose or intermittent form from around the 800s onward, with papal ships appearing in major Mediterranean conflicts and crusading-era operations. In medieval terms, think galleys, oars, sails, marines, and soldiers transported for coastal strikes or port defense. A fleet protected trade, moved troops, and gave the Pope leverage over the coast, especially around key ports. And in a world where roads were risky and politics shifted weekly, a ship could be the safest highway you had. 9. Now, the secret military person, the key-bearer. Here's the truth about medieval intelligence work. It existed everywhere, yet it's often invisible in records. Not because it didn't happen, but because the people who did it weren't supposed to be remembered. So let me introduce you to a figure historians rarely get to name clearly, a composite character inspired by the kinds of roles we know existed in papal courts and wartime Italy: messengers, fixers, discreet agents, and hired blades operating in the shadows of powerful men. And yes, mercenary culture made quiet violence very real. I'll call him the key-bearer. He doesn't wear armor in daylight. He wears a plain traveler's cloak. On his belt, a small pouch with wax, a seal ring, and a thin, wicked dagger meant for close quarters. His job is not to fight in formation. His job is to remove problems. A rebellious captain who might switch sides. A courier carrying rival contracts. A gate officer who keeps forgetting to open the city at the arranged hour. The key-bearer moves through taverns and stables, speaking softly in the dialect of whatever town he's in. He delivers letters that never go through official hands. He bribes when possible. He threatens when needed. And when nothing else works, he makes sure a person simply doesn't arrive. Because in medieval Italy, the Pope could bless banners all day. But the fate of a campaign might hinge on a single man's loyalty. Or a single death that looks like an accident. And the scariest part? In the morning, the army marches. The banners wave. The chroniclers write about courage and miracles. And no one writes the name of the man who made that miracle possible. Closing, what the medieval Vatican's army really was. So what was the medieval Vatican army in its heyday? Not one perfect standing force. But a machine of influence, made of city militias holding walls. Noble and professional cavalry delivering shock. Condottieri mercenaries hired by contract. Infantry and crossbowmen doing the brutal work. Siege engineers turning time into victory. And even a papal naval presence when the coastline mattered. It was politics in armor. Faith with a payroll. And sometimes, when the banners weren't enough. It was a shadow with a key-shaped seal, walking quietly through the dark. If you enjoyed this kind of hidden history, tell me in the comments. What period should we explore next? Crusader logistics, medieval spies, or the most feared mercenary companies in Italy? And if you want more stories like this, like, subscribe, and join us for the next one.